when you watch people running down the street, you see all different styles of running, and you see those people who just look like it's so easy, and then people who you look at and you're like, probably doesn't feel so easy.
Yeah.
And so there's not really like right or wrong. It's just figuring out how you can be the most efficient with your energy. Because if you're newer to running and you're training for a longer distance, you want to try and conserve your energy for as long as you can, right? So there's a lot of debate. The first thing is usually about what part of your foot strikes the ground. So you see a lot of people who kind of shuffle along like this, and it's like their whole foot is kind of on the ground. You see people whose focus is really on the heel strike, and so they're running more like this way. And then you see more people who are like ball of your foot striking. And ultimately what it comes down to is you don't want to be shuffling your feet, because that's not very efficient. And you don't really want to be heel striking, because there's a lot of impact every time you step. So it is somewhere in the middle. And the way that you're going to find where that middle ground is by how long your stride is. So trying to keep your stride as short as possible can be really helpful. And really what you're doing when you're striding is trying to keep going forward. So you see a lot of people who run and they're kind of back like this, and it's like one part of their body's going one way and the rest of their body's going the other way. And one way that someone once described to me, which I found really helpful, was when you're running, you think of, I'm going to use your back here, as like your back being like a plane taking off. So you want to think of everything going this way. So rather than kind of running back like this, you're thinking of almost leading with your chest, and so you're running this way. So energy is always going forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The other thing is obviously with your feet. A lot of this comes from muscle imbalances, just from what we do every day. You know, a lot of us are sitting a lot. We might sit cross-legged, and so different parts of our legs get tight. Running also makes different parts of our legs really tight. Sometimes you see people who their feet kind of like flail back behind them, so that's not the most efficient either. So again, always thinking of your body going forward, including your feet, that's going to be really helpful. Arms as well. So short arm movements, when you get your arms really kind of pumping like this, like you might be able to do on a treadmill, but not so much when you're actually running on your own. That's going to again keep everything pretty efficient. So core strength is important. So if we're not thinking of engaging our core, thinking of belly button kind of pulling back towards your spine, then you can get into this sinking into your back. So thinking of this and leading forward with your chest, and that's going to be sort of the most efficient in terms of running technique.
Is it best to be on the ball of your foot, you said?
Well, yeah, pretty much. It's it almost feels a bit more like prancing.
Yeah,
like you're
Are we
kind
doing
of
prancercise?
prancing this way. Yeah, prancercise is awesome. Yeah, so more so the ball of the foot here versus the heel. When you're hitting with your heel, there's a huge amount of impact that's going to come all the way up your legs, your knees, your hips, and your lower back. When you're hitting with the ball of the foot, it becomes a bit more distributed up through your whole leg. So the way that you're going to get that ball of the foot strike more versus the heel is to think of keeping your stride quite short. So if you're thinking of really making a distance, then you're more likely to hit your heel. But if you hit with the ball of the foot, you can keep your stride short and your stride will be much more efficient. That make sense? Yeah. Okay. So the other thing with running, especially if you're newer to running, is stretching is really important. As you may have felt as you've been training, different parts of your legs get super tight. You may start to experience, knee pain, hip pain, low back pain, all of those things. Yeah? Yeah?
Yeah.
You're feeling it?
Pain all around.
Pain all around, yeah. So definitely after. Stretching before is not as important. When you're warming up, if you just start off slow, that's more important than sort of darting off. So you want to allow your body to adapt. And it doesn't matter what your ultimate pace is, it's just slowly leading up to that. So taking that first 5-10 minutes to just get yourself going and in the zone, and then your body has that time to adapt and get into that sort of mode. But in terms of stretching afterwards, you want to definitely make sure that you're getting sort of your whole body, but your legs especially. So even starting down at your feet. So if you are a heel striker, a lot of what can happen is things like heel pain, and then even getting into plantar fasciitis. So that's tightness through the bottom of your foot. So stretching out through the bottoms of your feet can be really good. And one way to do that is if you come down onto your knees here and you bend your toes this way, and then just sitting back onto your feet. So this can be a really, really intense stretch for people. And so just being aware of that, you can always bring your weight a little bit further forward so that you're taking some of this weight into your hands and not in your feet. With shoes on, it's not going to be as intense as if you were barefoot. So, keeping that in mind as well. Then moving up, so you just want to start kind of down at the bottom and move all the way up. So calf stretch is really important. You can do this, pushing onto a wall or a bench or something like that. But basically what we're doing is we're just stepping one foot back and lunging into that front leg. So when you're doing that, if you're pushing against the wall or a bench or something, you can get a little bit of a deeper stretch, but making sure that that back heel's on the ground and that the foot's pointing straight forward. So you have two calf muscles. When your back leg is straight, you're stretching one of them. When you bend your back knee, and it won't bend a lot, that's when you're going to get the second one. So you want to make sure you're doing both. So what happens is both of those muscles attach down into your Achilles tendon, which is that tendon that kind of sticks out behind your ankle, and actually comes down into the heel and all the way down through the foot. So that's why, Achilles tendonitis is something that is common with runners. So really stretching out the calves is going to be important. Shins are also one. I don't know if anyone felt that they've been getting shin splints or pain in their shins at all? The fronts of your legs?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So another stretch for that is coming down onto your knees again. But this time, you're going to kind of lift up. So you're bringing your weight back into your feet and pointing your toes. This one you're going to get more of a stretch if you're in bare feet because your shoes won't be in the way. But keeping those toes pointed and then coming back, you should get a stretch through your shins there.
The ballerina pose.
The ballerina pose, yeah.
My arms.
So so then quads. What happens with running is that we really tighten up the outsides of our legs. So our IT bands, which come all the way up from our hips and connect down into our knees. So we actually have 4 quadricep muscles. A lot of times we just think of our quad, but we actually have 4, and we have one that is on the inside, one that's in the middle, one that's on the outside, and then the most superficial one that kind of goes all the way over. So what happens with running is it's very tightening to the outsides of our legs, but it doesn't really do anything in terms of strengthening for the insides. So what happens then is we can get an imbalance between the quad muscles on the outside and the inside, and usually what we get first from that is knee pain. If you're not experiencing knee pain, that's awesome, you don't want to. But one common way is that to help alleviate that with running is not actually looking to, is there something wrong with my knee, but look at that imbalance. Because what happens is both of these muscles come down and connect underneath our kneecap. And so they actually come over the kneecap, and that's what pulls when we bend and straighten our legs. So if you think of running, you're always going through some motion of bending and straightening. So keeping that looseness through the outside of your leg is going to be really important, and even working on strengthening the inside of the leg can help to maintain that balance. So has anyone heard of a foam roller? Has anyone foam rolled? Begrudgingly foam rolled their IT bands?
It only hurts the first time.
You're lucky. I find it extremely painful, but it is extremely helpful. So getting on a foam roller, lying on your side, and rolling up and down your IT band can be really helpful if you are starting to experience any sort of knee pain. If you aren't, it's also a really great preventative measure. So rolling up and down along the thigh. The other thing too is sometimes that can get a little bit intense. So what you can do is even take something like a tennis ball and sitting in a chair, just roll that tennis ball up and down the outside of your leg. So that's probably the number one thing for runners, is keeping that balance between the insides and the outsides of the leg. One way to stretch your IT band is if you cross your legs like this, come down over your front leg, and think of, for your back leg here, just kind of sticking that hip out to the side. So it's kind of an awkward stretch, but you can start to feel and really think of kind of pushing that hip out through the IT band, definitely at the insertion. So that's probably the biggest one. One more for your hips, which can be really good, is you can actually do it sitting down. I'll show you on the bench. Is just sitting here, crossing one ankle over your thigh, and then starting to come forward. So some people, coming into this position is going to be a good enough stretch, and this is a great place to stay. Ultimately, we're trying to feel that stretch through the outside of your top leg. So coming forward here, and you'll get more of a stretch through there. So on top of that, stretching through your hamstrings and your quads. So something like this, just to get that whole, all of the quadricep muscles will be really helpful. And then a hamstring stretch, there's lots of different ones you can do, kind of reaching forward like this, pulling that toe back so you're getting your calves as well. Also, if you're on a bench, something like this, bringing your leg up, coming forward. You can also do it seated. So those are kind of the main ones. Does anyone have any, I know it's cold, does anyone have any questions?
I haven't been able to find a stretch for my calves that works. Unless I'm like hooked into a bike and dropped my heel down.
Yeah, so sometimes a stretch like this is just not enough. One thing you can do, if you're in a door frame, or something like this, it's just a little easier in a door frame, pulling your heel up and then pulling yourself in, that would be one to try. Also, if you're standing on a stair, dropping your heels down below the stair.
Okay.
Those can be a bit more, a little bit deeper, a little bit stronger than this one. Yeah. The other thing too, in a stretch like this, if you really think of pulling your toes back, you may get a stretch through the calves as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
I usually go like this. Is this like?
Yeah, for your hamstrings. So, what's nice about if you're going to bring your leg up that high, flexing your foot back always, because then you'll get that stretch through your entire leg. So your hamstring actually connects down below your knee, and so when you stretch, pull your heel back, you'll get a stretch through the entire necessarily a technique thing, but that's a good place to stretch as well. And for all of us who are sitting for a good part of our day, hip flexors get tight no matter what. So there are a couple of stretches you can do, even coming back into that calf stretch position, but instead of really focusing on pressing into your back foot, think of tucking your pelvis under. So it's like bringing your tailbone forward. Do you feel a stretch through there? Yeah. And even to increase that, you can reach that arm up and even over as well. It's pretty deep. Another one would be what they call a runner's lunge, which would be, hey guys, like down into a lunge like this, and same thing, thinking of pulling your hips forward. So anytime to get that hip flexor, it's going to be tucking the pelvis under like that.
No, come on. Get rid of this one. Like, in your time to keep yourself going, about like how to, when your physical body says to stop, and you stop, like, what's the best way to keep getting your endurance like better?
Keep doing it.
Yeah, just keep.
I mean, probably what you'll find is that each time that you go, or as you start to see improvements every week, that give out place is going to be a little bit further, right? So it really just is all about continuing to do it. A lot of times we think that it's our body saying stop, but it's our bodies can do it. Our bodies can go for the most part, and a lot of times it's our brains being like, I'm tired, I'm ready, I'm hungry, like all of these other things. So during those times, I mean, some people find it helpful to even just to distract yourself from your mind, like even count your steps. So you kind of just focus on one thing, or really focus on your breath. So depending on what your breathing is, even going like in, out. So you're like, and just like try to change what that focus is, because your body has the ability to do it. It's just, it gets uncomfortable. So that's when your mind says, stop. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just like as you're starting to increase the amount that you're doing, it just gets harder, right? Because you're just pushing yourself even more. So, for some people, they find slowing down a little bit when they get to that point, so that it's like, okay, take a minute and then go again. For other people, if they slow down, they'll never start again. So it's like figuring out what kind of works better for you.
Breakfast.
What's a good amount of time to eat before you go run, generally?
Probably between for a decent meal, an hour and a half to 2 hours before, so that your body has time to digest. Corey obviously knows a lot about what you should be eating, but making sure that you're getting that balance, so that you have fuel in you to sustain you through the run. Depending on sort of how you're feeling through the run, I mean, there's lots of people who will have those gel packs, or even something in their water, if you're carrying water with you, to try to keep your energy up, and that's kind of up to you. But if you're going to do anything like that, if there's anything you're going to try, like putting in your water, or anything like that, hey sweetie, then try before the big day. Don't try anything new. So maybe the week before, 2 weeks before, I guess now is kind of 2 weeks before, but do sort of a trial run. So try a meal that you think would be really good for you that morning. Try having that, see how your body reacts. Like the few days leading up to it, don't go trying new foods, no new restaurants, things like that, because you just never know how your body's gonna react to it. So try to have something which is consistent and that your body's used to. And then make sure you eat within an hour of exercising too. That's really important. So afterwards, you want to try to replenish all of the fuel that you've used so that you can start at that full high level again when you go back later. So that's really important. Even if it's not a full meal within an hour, like something within an hour. Get running.
All right. Yes, thanks so much, Rachel.
You're
That's awesome.
welcome.
Back to the car.
All right, let's get one group photo with Rachel.